The first thing Derek Mason noticed about the man in seat 1A was the hoodie. Charcoal gray, soft-looking fabric that probably cost more than Derek's monthly car payment, but without a single logo or brand visible. The kind of wealth that whispered instead of shouted. The second thing Derek noticed was the skin. Dark brown, smooth, unbothered. And that bothered Derek more than he'd ever admit out loud. He didn't recognize the face from any frequent flyer wall of fame, didn't see the Rolex or designer luggage or any of the usual markers that separated the real platinum members from the pretenders. Just a black man in his early 40s, jeans, sneakers, and that expensive-looking hoodie settling into the most coveted seat on Flight 2820 like he belonged there. Derek's fingers found the boarding pass scanner almost on instinct. The little red light blinked twice, system error, or maybe not an error at all. Maybe the universe telling him to look closer, ask questions, protect the integrity of first class the way he'd been protecting it for 16 years. In exactly 45 minutes, this man would fire Derek and destroy everything he'd built. But right now, under the harsh gate lights at Chicago O'Hare's Terminal C, Derek Mason had no idea he was staring at his own executioner. The morning had started normally enough for Marcus Sterling. 5:30 alarm in his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. The kind of view that cost 7 figures but never impressed him the way it should. Coffee from beans shipped from a farm in Colombia he'd invested in 3 years ago. Wall Street Journal spread across Italian marble countertops. The routine of a man worth $4.2 billion who still remembered what it felt like to eat ramen for dinner 6 nights a week. The Loro Piana cashmere hoodie went on first. $2,400 of Italian craftsmanship that looked like $40 of H&M comfort. Jeans from a brand nobody outside fashion circles would recognize. Brunello Cucinelli sneakers with leather so soft it felt like wearing clouds, $1,100 that appeared to be $90 Nikes. Marcus dressed for invisibility, for the audit he'd been planning since the Reddit posts started flooding in 3 months ago. SkyPulse Airlines, his airline. 30% ownership, enough to swing any board vote, enough to fire anyone who violated the values he'd spent 20 years building. And according to 47 separate posts across 3 different subreddits, enough racism in first-class cabins to fill a federal lawsuit. Talia Brooks had compiled the reports into a single document. Patterns emerged like constellations in a clear sky. Black passengers questioned about upgraded tickets they'd purchased legitimately. Hispanic travelers asked if they understood English well enough to sit in premium cabins. Asian business people having their credentials verified twice, 3 times, 4 times while white passengers breezed through. The numbers didn't lie. The stories didn't either. And Marcus Sterling had learned long ago that the only way to know if a system was broken was to test it yourself. He remembered being 10 years old, small hands gripping his mother's larger ones as they boarded a flight from Atlanta back to Chicago. Their seats had been upgraded at the last minute, some computer glitch that the gate agent had shrugged about and honored. First class. His mother had dressed him in clean khakis and a blue polo shirt, had made sure his backpack with the cartoon stickers was clean and new-looking. The flight attendant had appeared before they'd even buckled their seatbelts. Middle-aged woman with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and a voice like honey poured over broken glass. "Honey, are you lost? Coach is that way." His mother hadn't said a word, just handed over both boarding passes with the kind of dignity that only came from swallowing rage so often it became second nature. The flight attendant had studied the passes for what felt like an hour, walked away, whispered to another crew member, both of them looking back at the 10-year-old boy and his mother like they'd snuck into someone else's dream. No apology came, just a sigh, a shrug, and the faintest hint of surprise in her voice when she finally acknowledged them. "I guess these are real." Even at 10 years old, Marcus had understood something terrible. No matter how clean his clothes, how polite his behavior, how legitimate his ticket, he still didn't look like he belonged. and looking wrong in America was sometimes the only crime that mattered. The memory sat in his chest like a stone as he packed the navy Tom Ford suit into his black leather tote. The suit would come later, after the test, after the reveal. Right now, he needed to look exactly like the kind of passenger Derek Mason and people like him assumed didn't belong in first class. Talia's voice came through his AirPods as he locked the penthouse door. Reddit activity is up another 12% this week. 3 new posts about Sky Pulse discrimination, all first class, all passengers of color. The pattern's accelerating. Her tone carried the weight of facts without judgment, the kind of professional detachment that made her the best executive assistant in Chicago. "Time for a personal audit," Marcus said, stepping into the private elevator. The ride to O'Hare took 38 minutes in morning traffic. Marcus watched the city slide past tinted windows, breakfast spots, and coffee shops opening for the day. People starting their routines without knowing that somewhere in the sky above them, an entire industry was about to shift on its axis. The acquisition deal in Los Angeles was real. $100 million, contracts that needed signatures before 6 p.m. Pacific time. Lawyers waiting in Century City offices that charged by the minute. But Marcus could have flown private, could have had the contracts couriered, could have done 1,000 things differently. He chose Sky Pulse Flight 2820 because sometimes the only way to know if your house was on fire was to walk through every room yourself. Gate C-17 appeared through the terminal crowd at exactly 7:15 a.m. The counter agent was young, maybe 29, with tired eyes and the kind of customer service smile that came from a corporate training manual. Marcus approached with his boarding pass already pulled up on his phone, platinum tier status glowing on the screen like a badge he'd earned through 200,000 miles in the air. The agent's smile flickered. Just for a second, just long enough to notice if you were watching for it. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. Can I see your ID, please?" He handed over his driver's license. She studied it longer than necessary, eyes flicking between the photo and his face like she was trying to solve a puzzle only she could see. "This photo doesn't quite look like you." The statement hung in the air. Not a question, not an accusation, but something in between that felt like both. "I grew a beard since that photo," Marcus said, voice calm and even. "Everything else is current." She turned the license over, checked the back, held it up to the light like she expected to find a watermark proving forgery. Other passengers moved through adjacent lines without this kind of scrutiny, their IDs glanced at and handed back within seconds. "Let me just verify this with my supervisor." She disappeared through a door marked "Employees Only." Marcus waited. Behind him, a man in an expensive suit and salt and pepper hair made a sound of impatience. "Ethan Parker, ethics consultant based out of Boston, traveling to Los Angeles for a conference on corporate accountability." He'd later tell investigators that he noticed the extra scrutiny immediately, that it reminded him of research he'd done on implicit bias in service industries. The supervisor emerged. Older woman, maybe 50, with the kind of authority that came from 2 decades of dealing with difficult passengers. She looked at Marcus, looked at the ID, looked at her computer screen. "Everything appears to be in order," she said to the younger agent, handing back the license. Her voice carried an edge of annoyance that wasn't directed at the passenger being verified. Marcus took his ID back without comment. The whole process had taken 4 minutes and 17 seconds. 4 minutes where every other passenger in the area had boarded without issue. "Have a good flight, Mr. Sterling." He moved towards security. The damage was already done, the seed already planted. That's how these things worked. One small moment of doubt, one extra verification, one implication that you didn't belong where you clearly had every right to be. And the worst part was knowing it would happen again before he even reached his seat. A pre-check should have meant a faster line, fewer questions, The kind of streamlined experience that came from being a trusted traveler. Marcus had global entry, clear, every program designed to speed up the process for people who flew as often as he did. The agent waved him to the side anyway. Random additional screening, sir. Step over here, please. Officer Rodriguez, 45 years old with dark circles under his eyes and a wedding ring that looked like it had been worn for 2 decades. He gestured toward a separate area where 2 other agents waited with purple gloves and expressions of professional boredom. Marcus watched 7 passengers pass through the regular line while he stood waiting. All of them white. All of them waved through with barely a glance at their belongings. Statistical probability said that random was never truly random, that algorithms and human choices both had built-in biases that replicated themselves across millions of small decisions every single day. Arms out to the side, please. The pat-down was thorough, hands running down his sides along his legs across his back. Professional but invasive in a way that made something hot and familiar burn in his chest. He'd been through this before, he'd be through it again. The frequency didn't make it easier. His carry-on bag went through the X-ray machine twice. An agent opened it, removed his laptop, his tablet, the carefully folded Tom Ford suit. Can you boot this up for me? Need to verify it's a working device. Marcus powered on the laptop, waited while the agent watched the Apple logo appear, watched the login screen materialize, watched proof that a $1,300 MacBook Pro was indeed a functioning computer and not some elaborate prop for sneaking onto an airplane. Is this your suit? It's mine. Expensive. The word hung there like an accusation. I have a meeting in Los Angeles, Marcus said. His patience was a muscle he'd spent 40 years training, and it was getting a workout this morning. Behind him, someone was filming. Devin Mitchell, 28 years old, content creator with 200,000 followers across various platforms, had his phone out at waist level. The video would later show the entire interaction, time-stamped and geotagged. Proof that this wasn't isolated paranoia but documented reality. The caption would read, "Profiling at O'Hare TSA, Gate C Security. Watch what happens when you fly while black, 5,000 views in the first 2 minutes. The algorithm loved outrage. Loved. Marcus's shoes came off, got inspected, went through the X-ray again. His belt, his watch, everything examined with the kind of attention that suggested suspicion rather than security. He complied with every request, didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, didn't give them any excuse to escalate from inconvenience to incident. That was the game. Stay calm, stay polite, let them tire themselves out proving what you already knew they believed. Eventually, they let him go. His belongings repacked sloppily, his suit wrinkled from careless handling, his dignity dented but not broken. The walk to gate C-17 took 6 minutes. He had 20 minutes before boarding. Time enough to check email, review contracts, pretend that the last 15 minutes hadn't reminded him exactly what it felt like to be presumed guilty until proven innocent. His phone buzzed. Talia, how's the audit going? About as expected, he typed back. Pattern confirmed. She didn't respond, didn't need to. They'd worked together long enough that she knew what that meant. The gate area filled up slowly. Business travelers with roller bags and coffee cups. Families with strollers and snacks. A handful of people already dressed for California weather. Shorts and sandals in October like they could will the sunshine into existence. Marcus recognized the pre-boarding types immediately. First-class passengers who'd paid for the privilege of sitting down first, getting their bags stowed first, claiming their space before the masses arrived. And there was Derek Mason working the gate counter in his first officer uniform. Sky Pulse regulations technically didn't allow flight crew to handle boarding procedures, but Derek had been doing it for years during layovers, earning extra hours, making himself indispensable. He scanned boarding passes with quick efficiency. Families with small children, active military, passengers needing extra assistance. Each one waved through with a smile and a nod. Then the platinum members, the elite status flyers who'd earned their way to the front through miles and loyalty and credit card spending. Marcus approached with his phone out, digital boarding pass glowing on the screen. Seat 1A. The best seat in first class, the one that came with extra legroom and a window view and the kind of status that should have meant automatic respect. Derek's eyes flicked from the phone to Marcus's face. Something shifted in his expression, subtle as a shadow crossing pavement. Platinum? Where'd you get this card? Marcus kept his voice level. I've been platinum for 8 years. The scanner beeped. Red light instead of green. Derek tried again. Same result. System's not recognizing it. Behind Marcus, the line was growing. He could feel eyes on his back, feel the familiar heat of being made into a spectacle without choosing to be one. I can pull up my account information if you need to verify. Derek pocketed the card. Just like that, sleight of hand so casual it almost seemed accidental. Except Marcus had been watching for exactly this kind of move. We'll sort this out at the aircraft. Step aside, please. Let me help these other passengers. Other passengers who were now boarding around him. A man in a tailored suit with a Toomey carry-on waved through without a glance at his credentials. A woman with Hermes luggage and oversized sunglasses welcomed aboard with a smile. And then Patrick Caldwell, 29 years old and dressed like someone who'd never been told no in his entire life. Designer everything, an aura of entitlement that preceded him like cologne. Right this way, Mr. Caldwell, Derek said. His whole demeanor changed, warm, deferential, the kind of customer service that came from recognizing wealth and power. You didn't scan his card, Marcus observed. Derek's jaw tightened. I know, Mr. Caldwell. I don't know you. The words landed exactly as intended. Not about security, not about procedures, about who looked like they belonged and who didn't. Marcus didn't argue. Arguments gave them ammunition, gave them reasons to escalate. He stepped aside and watched the rest of first-class board. Watched Derek greet them by name, wave them through, make small talk about their travels. Watched the system work exactly the way it was designed to work. When the final boarding call came, Derek gestured Marcus forward with obvious reluctance. I'll need to verify this with the crew once you're aboard. The jet bridge stretched ahead like a tunnel into something darker than just a flight to Los Angeles. Marcus had walked thousands of jet bridges in his life. This one felt different. This one felt like walking into a test he'd already failed just by showing up. The aircraft door opened into first class. Cream leather seats, warm lighting, the smell of coffee already brewing somewhere in the galley. Luxury that Marcus's shares had helped pay for. Comfort he'd approved in board meetings, amenities he'd voted to upgrade. Rachel Hayes intercepted him before he reached seat 1A. Lead flight attendant, 12 years with Sky Pulse, the kind of seniority that came with confidence and just enough authority to be dangerous. Excuse me, sir, are you sure you're in the right cabin? Her smile was professional. Her eyes were not. Marcus held up the torn boarding pass, the half that Derek hadn't kept. Seat 1A. First class, this looks damaged. Where's the other half? Your colleague tore it at the gate. Rachel's hand shot out faster than professional courtesy should have allowed. She snatched his wallet from the armrest where he'd set it down for just a second, lifted it over her head like evidence at a crime scene. Let security verify if this is real. Passengers were watching now. The cabin had gone quiet in the way that public confrontations always created. That awful stillness where everyone pretended not to stare while absorbing every detail. Senator James Caldwell looked up from his Financial Times in seat 3A. 58 years old, silver hair, the kind of face that looked distinguished in photographs and cruel in person. He owned 25% of Sky Pulse Airlines, Not quite enough to outvote Marcus's 30%, but enough to cause problems if he wanted to. And right now, watching this black man being questioned in first class, Senator Caldwell very much wanted to cause problems. Patrick, seated in 2A, smirked at his phone, probably texting friends about the entertainment. Probably already composing the story he'd tell at dinner parties about the time some random guy tried to scam his way into first class. Devin Mitchell in row 7 had his phone out again. The live stream was already running. 5,000 viewers had become 20,000. The algorithm was very good at finding outrage. Maya Washington in seat 4C gripped her armrests with both hands. 22 years old, journalism student at Northwestern, flying to Los Angeles for an internship interview. She'd saved for 6 months for this ticket. She recognized the tone in Rachel's voice because she'd heard it before, directed at her mother, at every black woman who'd ever dared to exist in spaces that weren't designed for them. Isabella Martinez leaned forward from 5B, social worker, 29, carrying the weight of 1,000 injustices she'd witnessed in her professional life. This wasn't her fight yet, but she was watching, calculating, deciding where the line was between observer and participant. Marcus stood perfectly still. Let Rachel wave his wallet around, let the cabin watch, let Devin film every second. This was the audit, this was the proof. This was 40 years of small humiliations and large indignities crystallizing into a single moment that would either change everything or confirm that nothing ever would. Rachel tossed the wallet across the cabin. It bounced off the seat back in row 2 and fell to the floor with a sound that seemed louder than physics should have allowed. Security will match it to your fake ID. Marcus bent down slowly, picked up the wallet, checked that his cards were still inside, his license still there, everything intact except his dignity. But that was always the cost of flying while black. Tyler Bennett appeared from the rear galley. Security coordinator, 32 years old, the kind of military haircut and rigid posture that suggested he took his job very seriously. Maybe too seriously. Is there a problem here? Rachel gestured at Marcus like he was evidence rather than a person. This passenger has a questionable boarding pass and unverified credentials. I need you to escort him off the aircraft until we can confirm his legitimacy. The words were carefully chosen. Questionable, unverified, legitimacy. None of them explicitly racist, all of them carrying water for racism's agenda. Ethan Parker slammed his tray table. The metallic crash echoed through first class like a gunshot. This is profiling. This is obvious profiling. His voice was white Massachusetts-educated professional outrage, the kind of anger that came from recognizing injustice without having to live it daily. It carried weight that Marcus's own objections wouldn't have. "Sir, I need you to calm down," Tyler said. Ethan didn't calm down. "I've been watching this since the gate. This man has shown his boarding pass multiple times. He has proper ID. The only thing questionable here is how you're treating him." Rachel's professional smile cracked at the edges. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm the lead flight attendant on this aircraft, and I have full authority to discriminate?" Isabella was standing now. "Because that's what this looks like." Tyler's hand moved toward the radio on his belt. This whole thing was spiraling beyond his training, beyond the simple categories of compliant and non-compliant passengers. And Marcus still hadn't said a word. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, dialed. Talia answered on the first ring. "Start Protocol 3, he said quietly. His voice was calm, but something underneath it vibrated with the kind of controlled fury that came from a lifetime of this exact moment. "Logging. Already recording. Are you safe? For now." He ended the call, looked up at Tyler, at Rachel, at Derek, who'd appeared from the cockpit to watch the situation he'd created. "You might want to double-check that story about my fake ID." Derek pulled the platinum card from his pocket, the one he'd confiscated at the gate. Marcus had wondered if he'd be bold enough to actually steal it. Question answered. Doesn't even show up in our system. Imagine that. Ethan Parker was on his feet now. That's theft. That's literal theft, and all of you are witnessing it. Rachel kicked something under the seat in front of her. The torn boarding pass disappeared beneath first-class luxury like trash swept under an expensive rug. Trash belongs with trash, she muttered, just loud enough for the microphones to catch it. Devon's live stream had 50,000 viewers now. The comments were flooding in faster than the platform could display them. People tagging airlines, tagging news outlets, tagging lawyers. Marcus bent down again, retrieved the torn boarding pass from where Rachel had kicked it, unfolded it carefully, handed it to Ethan. "Read it," he said. Ethan's voice, when it came, was clear and loud enough for everyone in first class to hear. Marcus Sterling, Seat 1A, Platinum Tier. The cabin went very still. Different kind of still than before. This was the stillness of people realizing they'd witnessed something they couldn't unsee. Rachel's smile vanished completely. Tyler shifted his weight from foot to foot. Derek's hand tightened around the stolen platinum card. And then Senator Caldwell stood up. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been questioned in his entire life. Someone whose authority came from decades of wielding power over people who couldn't fight back. "Young man, I suggest you cooperate. I'm on the board of this airline." His voice carried the weight of money and influence and the absolute certainty that those things mattered more than truth. Marcus met his eyes, didn't blink, didn't look away. "Then you should know your employees are violating federal anti-discrimination law." The senator's face flushed. "I know insolence when I see it." Patrick was filming now too. Phone held high like he was documenting something hilarious instead of something that would later be used as evidence in federal court. Rachel grabbed Marcus's wallet again. This time she threw it with real force, sent it spinning across the cabin like a frisbee. It hit the beverage cart, bounced off with a metallic clang, skidded to a stop near the galley. "Let security sort out if any of this is real." Tyler moved closer. His hand didn't quite touch Marcus's arm, but the threat was implicit. The space between touch and threat was where authority liked to live, where it could claim innocence while exerting control. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me." Marcus picked up his wallet from where it had landed. Everything still inside, still intact. He was very good at holding on to what belonged to him even when people tried to take it away. His phone was already recording. Talia was recording. Devon was recording. Somewhere in the world, the truth was being documented in real time across multiple devices and platforms and cloud storage systems. But none of that would matter if he let this moment slip into violence, if he gave them the excuse they were looking for to make him the problem instead of them. He called Talia again. Protocol 3. Verbal incident upgraded to physical contact. Log everything. Her response was immediate, professional. The sound of someone who'd wargamed this exact scenario 100 times. Logged. Corporate stream is active. Everything is time-stamped. Board notifications sent. In the cabin, Tyler looked uncertain for the first time. His training said remove disruptive passengers, but his eyes said maybe this passenger wasn't the disruptive one. Rachel leaned against the galley entrance. "This is what happens when we stop enforcing class barriers." She said it loud enough to be heard, said it like she wanted it to be heard, like the quiet part was supposed to stay quiet, but she was tired of pretending. Ethan's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "What class barrier? He's shown a platinum card. He's shown a valid boarding pass. The only barrier here is your bias." Senator Caldwell stepped into the aisle. His presence was designed to intimidate, to remind everyone who had real power on this aircraft. "I've seen enough disruption. Remove this man or I'll have your jobs." The threat landed exactly as intended. Tyler's hand moved toward his radio again. Derek nodded from the cockpit doorway like a judge approving a verdict. and Marcus Sterling, CEO of Nexus Dynamics, owner of 30% of SkyPulse Airlines worth $4.2 billion, stood in the aisle of his own aircraft and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just confirmed every suspicion, validated every Reddit post, proven every pattern. It was the smile of someone who'd walked into a trap knowing exactly what would happen, and who'd brought cameras to document every second. "Senator," Marcus said quietly, "you might want to reconsider who you're protecting." The senator's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. In exactly 28 minutes, everyone in this cabin is going to remember this conversation very differently than they think they will." Tyler's radio crackled. "Captain requesting security status update." Derek moved forward. "We have a situation. Passenger refusing to comply. Suspect fake credentials." Marcus didn't resist when Tyler's hand finally made contact with his arm. Didn't pull away when the grip tightened. Didn't fight when he was guided toward the front of the aircraft. He just looked at each person as he passed. Rachel, who wouldn't meet his eyes. Derek, whose jaw was clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Senator Caldwell, whose expression was triumph mixed with disgust. Patrick, still filming, still smiling. And then the passengers who'd stood up. Ethan, whose face was red with secondhand anger. Isabella, whose hands were shaking. Devin, whose live stream had passed 100,000 viewers. Maya, who had tears running down her face because she understood exactly what she was watching. "This isn't about me," Marcus said. Not to Tyler, not to Rachel, but to the cameras that were recording everything. "This is about how quickly you all decided I didn't belong." The captain's voice came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a slight delay while we handle a boarding issue. We appreciate your patience." A boarding issue, like Marcus Sterling, was a problem to be solved instead of a human being with every legal right to be exactly where he was. Tyler guided him toward the aircraft door. The jet bridge stretched ahead. Behind them, Rachel was already spinning the story for the remaining passengers, explaining away what they'd seen with practiced corporate language about safety and procedures and following protocol. But the cameras didn't lie. The live streams didn't lie. The recordings that were already being backed up to cloud servers in 3 different countries didn't lie. And in 27 minutes, when Marcus made the phone call that would ground this flight and summon the board of directors and expose the systematic discrimination that had been hiding in plain sight for years, none of their lies would matter anymore. He let Tyler escort him down the jet bridge. Let them think they'd won. Let them believe that removing him from the aircraft was the end of this story instead of just the beginning. Because Marcus Sterling had learned a long time ago that real power wasn't about winning fights in the moment. It was about choosing the battlefield, setting the terms, and making sure everyone who needed to see the truth had cameras rolling when it finally came to light. Behind him, the aircraft door closed. Ahead, the terminal waited. And somewhere in the next few minutes, justice was about to land hard enough to shake an entire industry off its foundations. The audit was complete. The documentation was irrefutable. The reckoning was scheduled. All that remained was watching people who'd spent years getting away with casual cruelty learn what it felt like when consequences finally came due. The jet bridge floor was industrial carpet over concrete, designed to muffle the sound of thousands of rolling suitcases every day. It muffled nothing when Tyler Bennett shoved Marcus Sterling against the wall hard enough to rattle the windows overlooking the tarmac. Not a shove that could be called assault in court, just aggressive enough to make a point. Careful enough to avoid security cameras that might be watching. Tyler had been trained well, trained to use force that looked like assistance, trained to escalate while maintaining plausible deniability. Marcus's shoulder hit the wall. Pain bloomed sharp and immediate, but he kept his face neutral, kept his breathing steady. 20 years of board meetings with men who wanted to destroy him had taught him how to absorb attacks without flinching. "Need you to stay right here while I call this in." Tyler said. His voice carried apology underneath the authority, like he knew this was wrong but couldn't quite figure out how to stop doing it. The radio crackled. Captain Andrews requesting ground security to Gate C-17. Possible credential fraud, passenger removed from aircraft, possible. That word doing heavy lifting, creating reasonable doubt where none existed, building the narrative that would later justify everything that came next. Marcus pulled out his phone. Tyler's hand shot out to grab it, but Marcus was faster, had already unlocked the screen and opened his contacts. I'm allowed to make a phone call, not until we verify your identity. You already verified my identity. 3 times. What you haven't verified is your assumption that I don't belong in first class. The words hung between them, truth so obvious it almost hurt to acknowledge. Tyler's jaw worked like he was chewing on a response that wouldn't come out right no matter how he phrased it. Behind them, through the aircraft windows, first-class passengers were settling into their seats. Rachel moved through the cabin distributing champagne and orange juice, the pre-flight service that came with premium pricing. She laughed at something Senator Caldwell said. Patrick had his AirPods in, scrolling through his phone with the bored expression of someone who'd never waited for anything in his life. They'd already forgotten Marcus existed, already moved on to the next moment, the next drink, the next comfortable assumption that the world worked exactly the way it was supposed to. But Devin Mitchell's live stream was still running. 127,000 viewers now, the number climbing every time Marcus glanced at his own phone screen. Comments flooding in from across the country, across the world, people who recognized this scene because they'd lived it. People who were outraged because they'd never imagined it. People who were already tagging news outlets and civil rights organizations and lawyers who specialized in discrimination cases. The truth was spreading faster than Sky Pulse Airlines could ever hope to contain it. Marcus dialed Talia. She answered before the first ring finished. Code red, ground flight 2820, full board alert. Her response was immediate, no questions, no hesitation. That was why he paid her $200,000 a year and gave her stock options that had already made her a millionaire twice over. Confirmed. Initiating emergency protocol. Logging already in progress, recording everything. Are you injured? Not yet, Marcus said, and something in those 2 words made Tyler take a half step back. Ground security appeared at the far end of the jet bridge. 2 officers in navy blue uniforms with Sky Pulse patches on their shoulders. Airport authority but airline payroll, the kind of dual loyalty that always bent toward whoever signed the checks. Officer Michael Harris was 42, 15 years in airport security after washing out of Chicago PD for reasons his file didn't specify but his reputation suggested. His partner, Officer Sarah Davis, was younger, 34, newer to the job and still uncertain about where the lines were drawn between enforcement and excess. They approached with hands near their belts, near the handcuffs and pepper spray, and all the tools that turned disagreements into incidents. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us. Marcus ended the call with Talia, slid his phone into his pocket, looked at both officers with the kind of calm that came from knowing exactly how this would end, and being willing to walk through hell to get there. I'll come voluntarily. I just need my boarding pass and identification returned first. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. The pass is being verified with the gate agent. The gate agent who works for the first officer who pocketed my platinum card? That gate agent? Harris moved closer. Sir, the more you cooperate, the faster we can resolve this. I am cooperating. I'm asking for my property to be returned before I'm detained without cause. Sarah Davis glanced at Tyler. What property? My Sky Pulse Platinum card. First Officer Mason took it at the gate and refused to return it. My boarding pass, which the lead flight attendant tore in half. And my wallet, which she threw across the first-class cabin. Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. She looked at Tyler for confirmation. There was some confusion about the passenger's credentials, Tyler said. Standard verification procedures. Throwing someone's wallet is standard procedure? The question came from behind them. Ethan Parker had deplaned, had followed Marcus down the jet bridge with the kind of righteous anger that white allies sometimes carried like weapons. This man showed valid ID multiple times. He has a legitimate boarding pass. The only confusion is why your crew decided he didn't belong in a seat he paid for. Harris turned, hand out in a stop gesture. Sir, I need you to return to the aircraft. I'm a witness to discrimination. I'm documenting what's happening here. You're interfering with an investigation. Into what crime exactly? Sitting while black. The words cracked through the jet bridge like lightning. Sarah Davis flinched. Tyler looked at the floor. Harris's face went red, but his training kicked in. The de-escalation techniques that worked when the person escalating was someone who looked like Ethan Parker. Sir, please return to the aircraft or I'll have to ask you to deplane entirely. Ethan pulled out his phone. Started recording. I'm calling my lawyer, and the ACLU, and every news outlet that covers civil rights violations. Behind him, Isabella Martinez appeared. Then Maya Washington, her face streaked with tears but her chin up, her phone also out and recording. The jet bridge was filling with witnesses. The kind of witnesses who couldn't be dismissed or intimidated, who had resources and platforms and the ability to make noise that echoed beyond airport walls. Harris's radio crackled. Captain Andrews requesting immediate status update. Need to know if we're cleared for departure. Negative, Harris said into the radio. Situation ongoing. On the aircraft, passengers were starting to notice the delay. Starting to pull out their own phones, starting to Google what was happening, starting to find Devon's live stream that was now at 200,000 viewers and climbing. The algorithm loved injustice. The algorithm loved conflict. The algorithm loved feeding outrage to millions of people who would share it with millions more. Marcus stood perfectly still. Let the witnesses gather. Let the cameras roll. Let every second be documented in high definition from multiple angles. Harris pulled out handcuffs. The metal caught the fluorescent lighting and threw sharp reflections across the jet bridge walls. Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. On what charge? Trespassing, failure to comply with crew instructions, disorderly conduct. The charges were boilerplate. The kind of vague accusations that could be applied to anyone doing anything an authority figure didn't like. They'd never hold up in court, but they didn't need to. They just needed to justify what happened next. I'll leave voluntarily, Marcus said again. No need for restraints. That's not your decision to make. Harris grabbed Marcus's arm. Not gently. Not the way someone guides a cooperative person. The way someone controls a threat. Sarah moved to the other side. Between them, Marcus was bracketed, boxed in, made small by their size and authority, and the weight of a system that had been doing this to people who looked like him since before he was born. Hands behind your back, now. Marcus complied. What else could he do? Fight and prove their assumptions right? Resist and give them justification for violence? The game was rigged and everyone playing it knew the rules favored the house. The handcuffs went on, metal against skin ratcheting tight. Each click was a promise of pain, each notch another degree of circulation cut off. These are too tight, Marcus said. His voice stayed level, but underneath it ran a current of something darker. I need medical attention. Harris didn't loosen them. Stop resisting and they'll feel fine. I'm not resisting. But the narrative was already written. In the report Harris would file later, Marcus would be described as agitated, non-compliant, requiring physical restraint for officer safety. The truth would be buried under layers of official language designed to transform victims into perpetrators. They pulled him toward the terminal, not walking him, pulling him, hands on his arms in grips that would leave bruises blooming purple by tomorrow. Ethan followed, still filming. "This is excessive force. He's complying. You're using excessive force. Sir, final warning. Return to the aircraft or leave the secure area. I'm leaving, and I'm calling every lawyer I know." He disappeared back toward the terminal, phone already at his ear, voice already rising in that particular tone of outrage that came from witnessing something that violated every principle he'd been taught to believe about justice and equality. Isabella and Maya hesitated at the jet bridge entrance. Sarah Davis blocked their path. "You two need to board or deplane, can't stay here." "We're witnesses," Isabella said. "Then you can give statements later. Right now you're in the way." They retreated but slowly, reluctantly, phones still out and recording until the last possible second. The footage would later show Marcus being escorted through the terminal. Handcuffs visible, head held high despite everything. The walk through O'Hare was a perp walk without the formal charges. Travelers stopped to stare. Some recognized him, saw the CEO who'd been featured in Forbes and Fortune and Wall Street Journal profiles. Some just saw a black man in handcuffs and made assumptions that came easier than questions. A child pointed. "Mommy, why is that man arrested?" The mother pulled her daughter closer. "Don't stare, honey." But everyone was staring. Everyone was watching. And somewhere in the crowd, more phones came out. More videos started recording. More evidence accumulated that would later make it impossible for SkyPulse Airlines to claim this never happened. They reached a small office near the security checkpoint. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a metal desk with a computer that looked older than Maya Washington. The room smelled like stale coffee, and the particular despair that came from bureaucratic spaces where people waited to be processed. Harris pushed Marcus into a plastic chair, stood over him with arms crossed, the universal posture of authority asserting itself. "We're going to verify your identity and credentials. Once we confirm everything, you'll be released. And if you can't confirm, then we'll have bigger problems." The threat was implicit but clear. If the system couldn't verify Marcus Sterling existed the way he claimed to exist, the system would assume he was lying rather than question its own limitations. Sarah Davis pulled up something on the computer, typed slowly Hunt and Peck style that suggested she wasn't comfortable with the software. "What's your legal name?" "Marcus Sterling, CEO of Nexus Dynamics. 30% shareholder of SkyPulse Airlines." The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples of realization spreading across Sarah's face, doubt creeping into Harris's expression. "You're saying you own part of the airline?" "I'm saying I'm the largest individual shareholder. And in about 15 minutes, the board of directors is going to be very interested in why 2 airport security officers handcuffed their boss." Harris's jaw tightened. "You got ID to prove that? You confiscated my wallet. It's in there, along with multiple forms of identification and the platinum card your crew claimed was fake." Sarah pulled the wallet from an evidence bag, opened it. Her face went pale. The driver's license was real. The passport was real. The American Express Centurion card was real and had a credit limit that probably exceeded Sarah's annual salary. And behind everything else, a business card that read Marcus Sterling, Chief Executive Officer, Nexus Dynamics, with a Chicago address in a building that Sarah definitely recognized. "Oh God," she whispered. Harris snatched the wallet, studied the contents like he could will them into being fake through sheer force of wanting them to be. "This doesn't prove ownership of SkyPulse." Marcus's phone buzzed in the evidence bag. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Text messages coming through, emails piling up, the digital footprint of a crisis spreading through corporate channels at the speed of fiber optic cable. "You can verify my identity through any number of databases," Marcus said. "Forbes publishes my net worth annually. Nexus Dynamics is publicly traded. I'm listed as CEO on every filing. Sky Pulse's shareholder registry will show exactly how many shares I control. Sarah was already typing, pulling up websites, confirming what her gut was screaming at her to believe. Harris's radio crackled. Captain Andrews requesting update on passenger situation. Need clearance for departure in 12 minutes. The timeline was compressing. 12 minutes until Flight 2820 was supposed to push back from the gate. 12 minutes until this became an FAA issue, a federal issue, something that couldn't be quietly resolved with apologies and comp tickets. Marcus leaned back in the plastic chair as much as the handcuffs allowed. The metal was cutting into his wrists, restricting blood flow. Exactly the kind of deliberately painful restraint that left no permanent marks but sent a clear message about power dynamics. I need those cuffs loosened or removed. I've been compliant. I'm not a flight risk. This is causing me physical pain. Harris didn't move. Not yet. Not until we verify everything. Then verify it. Call the Sky Pulse corporate office. Ask for the executive suite. Tell them you have Marcus Sterling in custody and watch how fast this situation changes. Sarah looked at Harris. Her expression said they should make the call, said they'd already stepped too far into territory that was going to get them fired or sued or both. Harris's pride wouldn't let him back down yet, wouldn't let him admit that maybe possibly they'd grabbed the wrong person in the worst possible way. The door opened. Derek Mason appeared, still in his first officer uniform, face flushed from whatever conversation he'd been having with the captain. "What's taking so long? We need clearance to depart." Harris gestured at Marcus. "He claims he owns the airline." Derek's expression flickered, just for a second, just long enough to show that somewhere deep down he knew this had gone wrong, had spiraled beyond anything he'd intended when he pocketed that platinum card back at the gate. "He's lying," Derek said. "Probably read about the real Marcus Sterling online and decided to impersonate him." "Call the corporate office," Marcus said again. His voice was still calm, but something underneath it had shifted, had moved from patience into something colder and more dangerous. "Call them right now and ask if Marcus Sterling is 40 years old, black, and currently supposed to be on Flight 2820 to Los Angeles." Derek pulled out his phone, made a show of scrolling through contacts, put it on speaker. The line rang 3 times. A voice answered, professional and slightly harried. "Sky Pulse Corporate, this is Jennifer." "Jennifer, this is First Officer Derek Mason, employee number 47251. I need to verify passenger information for a Marcus Sterling." Pause. Keyboard clicking. "Marcus Sterling? The Marcus Sterling?" Derek's face went from flushed to pale. "That's what I'm trying to confirm. Mr. Sterling is listed as board member and major shareholder. He's also flagged in our system as VIP, requiring immediate elevation of any service issues to executive level. Is there a problem?" More keyboard clicking, faster now, urgent. "Oh my God. Oh my God, we just got an emergency alert," code red from his executive assistant, something about Flight 2820. "Derek, where are you right now?" The office went silent, so silent that everyone could hear Jennifer's breathing pick up speed on the other end of the line, could hear the panic starting to creep into her voice. "Derek? Derek, answer me. Did something happen to Mr. Sterling on your flight?" Derek ended the call. The screen went dark. The phone clattered onto the desk. Harris and Sarah were both staring now. Not at Marcus. At Derek. At the man who'd just confirmed that everything Marcus had been saying was true and everything they'd been doing for the last 30 minutes was indefensible. "Take the handcuffs off," Sarah said. Harris didn't move. "Maybe this is all some elaborate, take them off now or I'm calling our supervisor and explaining why we handcuffed the airline's owner." The cuffs came off, metal released with a click that sounded like a cell door opening. Marcus brought his hands forward, examined the red marks on his wrists, the indentations where the metal had bit into skin. "I need a paramedic," he said, "and I need my phone." And in about 8 minutes, everyone involved in this incident is going to need a very good lawyer. Derek was backing toward the door. This is a misunderstanding. We were just following protocol for suspicious passengers. Suspicious based on what criteria? The question hung in the air, unanswerable because the real answer was obvious to everyone in the room. Derek ran, not literally ran, but moved quickly enough that it counted, disappeared back into the terminal like he could outrun what was coming. Sarah pulled a first aid kit from a cabinet, offered Marcus antiseptic wipes for his wrists. He waved them away. I want everything documented. Photograph these marks. They're evidence. Harris looked like he wanted to argue, but Sarah was already pulling out her phone, already taking pictures that would later be used in depositions and court filings and congressional hearings about civil rights violations in commercial aviation. Marcus's phone buzzed again. He retrieved it from the evidence bag, ignored Harris's weak protest about chain of custody. Talia's text was simple and devastating. Board convened. Chairman Hayes waiting for your call. Full emergency powers activated. He dialed. Robert Hayes answered immediately, voice tight with the kind of controlled panic that came from having billions of dollars on the line. Marcus, thank God. What's happening? Talia said code red, said you were removed from a flight, said there's video everywhere, the stock is already dropping. Ground flight 2820. Right now. Don't ask questions. Don't negotiate. Just ground it. Bob, I can't just ground a flight without... You can and you will. I'm invoking my rights as major shareholder to mandate an immediate safety review. That plane doesn't move until I clear it. Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that came from a man calculating risks, weighing options, deciding whether to trust the person who'd made him millions over the years. Consider it done. But Marcus, this is going to cost us. FAA penalties, passenger compensation, the PR nightmare. It's already a PR nightmare. The question is whether we control it or let it control us. Ground the plane, send the executive team to O'Hare, and start preparing termination paperwork for everyone involved. How many people are we talking about? 5, maybe 6. I'll have the full list when you arrive. The call ended. Marcus looked at Harris and Sarah, both of whom had heard every word and were trying very hard to pretend they hadn't. You two have a choice, Marcus said. His voice was soft, but every word carried weight. You can be witnesses who cooperated with the investigation, or you can be defendants who participated in civil rights violations. I suggest you choose wisely. Sarah nodded immediately. We'll cooperate, fully. Harris took longer, but eventually his survival instinct won over his pride. Yes, whatever you need. Good. Start by writing down exactly what happened from the moment you received the call about a suspicious passenger. Every detail, every assumption, every decision. I want it documented before anyone has time to coordinate their stories. He walked out of the office. The handcuff marks on his wrists were already darkening, already becoming the kind of visible evidence that photographs well and generates outrage and shifts public opinion. The terminal stretched ahead, gate C-17 visible in the distance. Flight 2820 was still there, still boarding, still existing in a reality where nothing had gone wrong yet. That reality had about 6 minutes left before it shattered completely. Marcus pulled out his phone again, called Talia. I need the garment bag, navy suit, Hermes tie, the whole presentation package. And I need it at gate C-17 in 5 minutes. Already on the way, Jenkins is driving from the office, should be there in 4. Perfect. And Talia, get me the file on Senator James Caldwell, complete background, every share he owns, every connection he has to Sky Pulse, every skeleton in his closet that might be relevant. The file's already in your inbox. I had a feeling he might be involved. That was why he paid her $200,000 a year. The walk back to gate C-17 felt longer than the walk away from it. People stared, but differently now, uncertain rather than judgmental, trying to reconcile the man in the expensive hoodie with the man who walked like he owned the airport, which in a sense he did. Nexus Dynamics had contracts with O'Hare for 3 different tech systems. His fingerprints were all over this building in ways most travelers would never know. Ahead, Jenkins appeared with the garment bag. 50-year-old driver who'd been with Marcus for a decade and knew better than to ask questions when emergencies arose. "Bathrooms around the corner," Jenkins said. "I'll stand guard." The transformation took 3 minutes. Hoodie off, Tom Ford suit on, Hermes tie knotted perfectly, shoes swapped for leather Oxfords that cost more than most people's monthly rent, hair checked in the mirror, cut edges sharp despite everything that had happened. Marcus Sterling, the passenger, disappeared. Marcus Sterling, the CEO, emerged. The man in the mirror looked like someone who belonged anywhere he chose to be, like someone who could fire 5 people with a phone call and destroy careers with a signature, like someone who'd been underestimated one too many times and was done tolerating it. The bandage on his temple from where his head had hit the armrest was still visible. Marcus left it there. Some wounds needed to be seen. Gate C-17's waiting area had filled with more passengers, more witnesses, more people who were about to learn that the flight they'd been waiting for was grounded and their schedules were destroyed. But they'd also learn why. And some of them would understand that delayed flights were a small price to pay for justice. The gate agent's eyes went wide when Marcus appeared. The suit did its job, commanded respect in a way the hoodie never could. Proof that presentation mattered even when it shouldn't. "I need to board Flight 282. "Oh," Marcus said. "Sir, the flight is grounded. Call the captain, he'll confirm." She picked up the phone, had a brief, confused conversation that ended with her face going pale and her hand shaking slightly as she hung up. "They're asking you to wait. The executive team is en route." "I'm not waiting." Marcus walked past her, through the door, down the jet bridge he'd been dragged through 30 minutes earlier. The carpet looked the same, the walls looked the same, everything looked the same, except Marcus wasn't the same person anymore. He was done being patient, done being polite, done giving people chances to do the right thing when they'd proven repeatedly they'd choose wrong. The aircraft door was still open. He stepped through. First class went silent. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Rachel dropped a champagne flute. It shattered on the galley floor, glass and alcohol spreading across industrial carpet. Tyler stood from where he'd been helping a passenger with luggage. His face drained of color so fast Marcus wondered if he might faint. Derek appeared from the cockpit, saw Marcus, froze like a prey animal who'd just realized the hunter had returned. And Senator Caldwell, comfortable in seat 3A with his Financial Times and his assumptions about how the world worked, looked up and saw his future crumbling in real time. Marcus walked to the front of first class, stood where everyone could see him, where every camera still recording could capture this moment in perfect clarity. "My name is Marcus Sterling. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Nexus Dynamics. I am the controlling shareholder of Sky Pulse Airlines with 30% ownership." His voice was calm, professional, the voice of someone delivering a board presentation about quarterly earnings rather than someone who'd been handcuffed and humiliated. "For the past 90 minutes I have been profiled, discriminated against, assaulted, and illegally removed from my own aircraft." Rachel's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the galley floor, glass crunching under her. "Effective immediately. First Officer Derek Mason, you are terminated from Sky Pulse Airlines. Lead Flight Attendant Rachel Hayes, you are terminated. Security Coordinator Tyler Bennett, you are suspended pending investigation." Derek's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Rachel was crying now, makeup running down her face in black streams. Tyler found his voice first. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who you were. You didn't need to know who I was. You needed to treat me like a human being with valid credentials and legal rights. You chose not to." Marcus turned to Senator Caldwell. The senator had stood, had pulled himself up to his full height like he could use physical presence to reassert dominance. "Mr. Sterling, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. If you'd known I owned more shares than you do, if you'd known I could outvote you on any board decision, that's the only thing that would have changed your behavior." The senator's face went from pale to red. "You're making a mistake. I have connections. I have influence. You had influence. Past tense, because in about 10 minutes the board is going to review footage of you encouraging these employees to discriminate against a passenger. And we're going to discuss exactly how someone with your voting power allowed systematic racism to flourish in this airline for years." Behind Marcus, the jet bridge door opened. Robert Hayes appeared, 71 years old and chairman of Sky Pulse Airlines, flanked by 3 other board members and 2 people who had lawyer written all over them. Bob took one look at the scene. Marcus in his suit with the bandage on his temple, the crying flight attendant, the terrified first officer, the shattered glass, and the passengers filming everything. And his face went gray. "Dear God," he whispered, "what have you people done?" Robert Hayes had witnessed 3 market crashes, 2 airline bankruptcies, and a shareholder revolt that ended with armed federal marshals in the boardroom. Nothing in 40 years of corporate warfare had prepared him for watching his airline's largest shareholder stand in first class with handcuff marks on his wrists and announce terminations to employees who'd assaulted him. The board members behind Bob moved past him into the cabin. Elizabeth Warren, CFO, her tablet already out and recording everything. Thomas Chen, head of operations, his face tight with the realization that every procedure manual was about to be rewritten. Margaret Foster from legal, already on her phone with what sounded like crisis management consultants. Derek Mason backed toward the cockpit door. His 16 years of seniority, his spotless safety record, his pension that was 3 years from vesting, all of it evaporating in real time as he watched his career end in the space where it had lived. "This is a mistake. I was protecting the integrity of first class, following protocols for suspicious passengers." Marcus didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. There's nothing in any protocol about pocketing a passenger's platinum card. Nothing about tearing boarding passes. Nothing about having security handcuff someone who showed valid credentials multiple times. I thought the card was fake. Based on what evidence? The question landed like a blade. Derek's mouth opened and closed, but no answer came. Because the truth was unacceptable and lies were useless with 200 passengers filming everything. Senator Caldwell stepped into the aisle. His political instincts were kicking in, the ones that had kept him in office for 3 terms despite scandals that would have destroyed lesser men. "Marcus, let's discuss this privately." Board member to board member. "I'm sure we can find a resolution that doesn't require this kind of public spectacle. The spectacle started when your employees dragged me off my own aircraft. I'm just providing the ending." Patrick Caldwell stood from seat 2A, phone still in hand, still recording like this was entertainment instead of the moment his father's career began its terminal descent. "You can't fire people for doing their jobs. Their job isn't discriminating against passengers. Their job isn't assault. Their job isn't creating the kind of hostile environment that generates 47 separate complaints in 5 years." The number hit the cabin like a grenade. 47. Not an isolated incident, not a misunderstanding, a pattern so consistent it had its own statistical significance. Bob Hayes moved to Marcus's side, voice low enough that only nearby passengers could hear. "I need you to step off the aircraft. We'll handle this through proper channels. HR, legal review, full investigation. But not here, not like this. It has to be here. It has to be now. Because if I walk away, this gets buried under NDAs and settlements and press releases that promise change without delivering it. The only way this stops is if everyone sees exactly what happens." when you violate someone's dignity. Bob's jaw tightened, but he nodded. 40 years of friendship and business partnership had taught him when Marcus Sterling had made up his mind and when arguing was pointless. Rachel Hayes was still on the galley floor, surrounded by broken glass that reflected the overhead lights in sharp fragments. Her crying had evolved into hyperventilating, great gasping sounds that shook her whole body. Tyler Bennett stood frozen in the aisle, caught between the instinct to help his colleague and the survival instinct that said any movement right now would be interpreted as aggression. Ethan Parker appeared in the aircraft doorway, slightly out of breath from running back through security. He took in the scene: Marcus in the suit, the board members, the crying flight attendant, and something like vindication crossed his face. "I called the ACLU and the Chicago Tribune and NBC Chicago. They're sending camera crews." The senator's face went from red to purple. "You're grandstanding, using this incident to generate publicity for some lawsuit." "The lawsuit already exists," Marcus said. "It existed the moment your employees put handcuffs on me. The publicity is just documentation." Talia Brooks appeared behind Ethan, tablet in hand, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd wargamed this exact scenario. "Media arriving in approximately 12 minutes. Legal team assembled and waiting in conference room 3B. HR has flagged personnel files for all individuals involved, and we're receiving reports of similar incidents." "How many?" She pulled up a document. 47 documented complaints filed with Sky Pulse customer service over the past 5 years. All passengers of color, all first class, all resolved with settlements and ND, as that prevented public disclosure. Get me the names, every victim, every settlement amount, every person who signed an NDA because they thought they had no other choice. Already compiled. The victims are being contacted now. 17 have agreed to go on record. 3 are lawyers themselves and very interested in class action proceedings. The cabin had gone silent except for Rachel's crying. Every passenger was absorbing this information, watching the architecture of systematic discrimination reveal itself like a building being demolished floor by floor. Senator Caldwell grabbed his briefcase from the overhead compartment. "I'm leaving, and I'm calling my lawyer, and the FAA, and every regulatory body that oversees airline operations." "Please do," Marcus said. "Make sure you mention the part where you told security to remove a passenger you'd never seen commit any violation, where you used your board position to intimidate employees into discriminating, where you helped create an environment where this happened 47 times." The senator pushed past board members toward the exit. Patrick followed, still filming, still documenting his father's downfall with the same detachment he'd shown when filming Marcus's humiliation. Bob Hayes turned to the remaining passengers. "On behalf of Sky Pulse Airlines, I apologize. What happened here today is unacceptable. We will be offering full refunds for this flight, travel vouchers, and compensation for your time." Devin Mitchell spoke from his seat in row 7. His live stream was still running. Viewer count now at 500,000 and climbing. "What about compensation for watching someone get assaulted? What about acknowledgement that we just witnessed a civil rights violation?" "You're right. That too. We'll be reaching out to every passenger for statements. Your testimony matters. Your video evidence matters. This can't be buried." The honesty surprised everyone, including Marcus. Bob Hayes was many things: corporate, calculating, focused on shareholder value above almost everything, but he wasn't stupid. He could see which way this wind was blowing, and he was choosing to sail with it rather than against it. Elizabeth Warren stepped forward, her CFO voice cutting through the emotional chaos with pure financial clarity. "Current stock price is down 8%. Social media mentions are through the roof, 92% negative. We're trending #1 on Twitter. The financial damage is already catastrophic, and it's been less than 2 hours." "How catastrophic?" "Approximately 400 million in market cap. And climbing. The number echoed through first class. $400 million lost because Derek Mason had decided a black man in a hoodie didn't look like he belonged in seat 1A. Margaret Foster from legal pulled Marcus aside. We need to talk about liability. Personal versus corporate, criminal versus civil. The exposure here is enormous. Good. I want the exposure to be enormous. I want every airline in America watching this and realizing what happens when discrimination stops being quietly profitable. You understand you're personally suing an entity you own 30% of. I understand I'm using my ownership to force accountability. The airline survives, the culture dies, that's the deal. She nodded, already making notes on her tablet, already building the legal architecture that would allow this to happen without destroying the company Marcus had invested hundreds of millions into. Tyler Bennett finally moved, approached Marcus with hands visible, posture submissive, every movement designed to signal non-threat. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't fix anything. I know sorry is worthless right now, but I need you to know I didn't want this. I was following orders. Following orders isn't a defense, it's an excuse. And it's the same excuse people have used to justify atrocities for all of human history. Tyler's face crumpled. What do I do now? You cooperate fully with the investigation. You testify honestly about what happened. You acknowledge that you participated in something wrong even if you didn't intend it. And then you spend the rest of your career making sure you never make this choice again. The younger man nodded, blinking back tears. Can I ask one question? Marcus waited. Why did you let it happen? You could have revealed who you were immediately. Could have stopped this before it started. Because if I'd stopped it, I wouldn't have proof it happens. Wouldn't have documentation of the full pattern. Wouldn't be able to force changes that prevent it from happening to the next person who doesn't own the airline. The answer settled over Tyler like weight. He walked back to his seat, shoulders hunched. A man who'd just learned an expensive lesson about complicity. Rachel Hayes stood up from the galley floor, glass crunched under her shoes. Her makeup was destroyed, her uniform wrinkled, her composure shattered beyond any hope of recovery. I have a daughter. She's 12. How do I explain to her that I got fired for racism? You tell her the truth. You tell her that you made assumptions based on someone's skin color, that you treated a passenger as less than human because of how he looked, that you threw his wallet across a cabin and tore up his boarding pass and called him trash. And then you tell her you're spending the rest of your life making sure she never makes the same mistakes. Rachel's crying intensified, but she nodded. The acknowledgement of guilt was the first step toward anything resembling redemption. Bob Hayes pulled Marcus further toward the galley, voice dropping to executive whisper. I need to know your endgame. Full transparency. What are you building toward? Complete overhaul of company culture. Third-party oversight of all discrimination complaints. Public reporting of incidents and resolutions. Mandatory bias training quarterly instead of annually. Zero-tolerance policy with teeth. And $100 million fund for diversity initiatives in aviation. The number made Bob wince. That's a significant capital allocation. It's a rounding error compared to what we'll lose if we don't fix this. $400 million gone in 2 hours proves the market cares about this. We either lead the change or we get destroyed by it. What about the senator? What about him? He owns 25%. He can make board meetings miserable. Not after the FBI finishes investigating his role in covering up 47 complaints. Not after the ethics committee reviews his conduct. His shares might survive, but his board seat won't. Bob's eyebrows rose. You're going after a sitting U.S. senator? I'm documenting what a sitting U.S. senator did on an airplane. What happens next is up to federal investigators and voters. The calculation behind Bob's eyes was visible. Weighing risks, measuring consequences, deciding whether to back Marcus fully or hedge with plausible deniability. He chose backing Marcus, all in. Whatever you need, legal resources, financial support, my personal testimony, this ends today. They shook hands. The gesture was theater for the cameras still filming, but it was also a contract between two men who'd built an airline together and were now rebuilding it in real time. Thomas Chen approached with tablet displaying a scheduling nightmare. We have 200 passengers who need to get to Los Angeles. Flights grounded indefinitely. What's the plan? Book them on competitors, first class on every flight regardless of original ticket. Full refunds plus $10,000 vouchers. Charter a plane if we have to. Nobody waits more than 2 hours. That's going to cost millions. Cheaper than a boycott. Make it happen. Isabella Martinez raised her hand from seat 5B. The gesture was almost childlike, trained politeness overriding the chaos. I have a question. What happens to all of us? The witnesses? You'll be contacted by our legal team for statements. Everything you saw, everything you filmed, everything you remember. Your testimony builds the case. Against who? Against systematic discrimination. Against a culture that allowed this. Against every policy and procedure and unspoken assumption that made today possible. Maya Washington stood, her voice still shaky but gaining strength. I've been profiled 4 times, different airlines, always in premium cabins, always the same questions about whether my ticket is real. I thought it was just me, thought maybe I was being paranoid. It's not paranoia when the pattern is documented across thousands of incidents. Marcus gestured to Talia's tablet. We're building a database. Every story matters. Every experience adds to the evidence. Ethan Parker checked his phone. NBC is here. CNN just called. This is going national. Good. It should be national. This isn't a Sky Pulse problem. It's an aviation industry problem. It's an American problem, and it doesn't get solved in private with settlements and silence. The aircraft door opened again. 2 people in FBI windbreakers stepped through, badges visible, expressions professionally neutral. Special Agent Rodriguez, this is Agent Kim. We're responding to reports of civil rights violations and assault. We need to speak with Marcus Sterling and anyone involved in the incident. Bob Hayes gestured toward Marcus. Mr. Sterling is right here, and these are the employees he's already terminated. Derek Mason's face went white. FBI involvement meant criminal charges were possible. Meant this wasn't just losing his job. Meant his future included potential prison time. We'll need everyone to remain on the aircraft until we've taken preliminary statements, Rodriguez said. This is now a federal investigation. The weight of those words settled over first class like snow. Federal investigation. Not corporate review. Not internal audit. Federal, with all the resources and authority that came with it. Marcus provided his statement first. Concise, detailed timeline documented to the minute. Showed the handcuff marks on his wrists, displayed the video footage from his phone and Talia's remote recording. Handed over the torn boarding pass, the wallet, every piece of physical evidence. Agent Kim took notes with the mechanical efficiency of someone who documented 1,000 crimes and knew exactly what would matter in court. You're alleging that First Officer Mason and Flight Attendant Hayes conspired to remove you from the aircraft based on racial bias? I'm stating facts. Mason pocketed my platinum card and claimed it was fake. Hayes threw my wallet and tore my boarding pass. Bennett and the security officers handcuffed me despite my compliance. Senator Caldwell encouraged them. The pattern of discrimination is documented across 47 previous incidents. Kim's pen stopped moving. 47? Talia handed over the compiled report. Names, dates, settlement amounts, everything organized with the precision of someone who understood that evidence needed to be bulletproof. We'll need to review all of this, Rodriguez said, but preliminary assessment suggests probable cause for civil rights violations under federal code. Derek Mason started crying. Not the gasping sobs that Rachel had produced, but quiet tears that ran down his face while he stood frozen in his first officer uniform. His career was over. His pension was gone. His freedom was potentially measured in months rather than years. And all of it because he'd made assumptions about who belonged in first class based on melanin content and hoodie fabric. The FBI agents worked through the cabin, taking statements from every passenger, collecting phone numbers and email addresses and video files. Devon's live stream alone had generated enough footage for a documentary. Combined with the dozen other passengers filming, the evidentiary record was overwhelming. Senator Caldwell appeared in the aircraft doorway, flanked by two lawyers in $1,000 suits. My client has no comment at this time and will not be providing statements without legal counsel present. Rodriguez looked up from her notepad. Senator Caldwell, we have video of you encouraging airline employees to remove Mr. Sterling. We have testimony from multiple witnesses. Whether you provide a statement now or later doesn't change the evidence. The senator's lawyer stepped forward. Any allegations of wrongdoing are strenuously denied. My client was simply a concerned passenger worried about flight safety. Concerned about what safety issue specifically? The lawyer didn't answer because there was no answer that didn't expose the underlying racism. Patrick Caldwell wasn't as smart as his father, wasn't surrounded by lawyers, wasn't trained in political deflection. I filmed the whole thing. It's on my Instagram, got like 50,000 views already. Agent Kim smiled. Agent Kim. Thank you. We'll be collecting that evidence. The realization hit Patrick's face in stages. First confusion about why the FBI cared about his Instagram. Then understanding that he'd just provided evidence against his own father. Then panic about his own liability. I was just recording. I didn't do anything. You posted content mocking a passenger being forcibly removed from an aircraft, content that's now evidence in a federal investigation. We'll need to examine your entire social media history. Patrick's lawyer arrived 90 seconds too late to stop him from incriminating himself further. The cabin was becoming a crime scene. Yellow evidence tape went up around the galley where Rachel had thrown the wallet. Photographers documented the blood on seat 1A's armrest from where Marcus's temple had hit. Everything preserved, cataloged, prepared for the legal proceedings that would stretch across the next 2 years. Bob Hayes pulled Elizabeth Warren aside. What's the total exposure looking like now? Financial? Billions potentially if this goes to class action with all 47 victims. Reputational? Incalculable. We're going to be the case study in business school about corporate discrimination for the next decade. Recommendations? Full cooperation with federal investigation, immediate implementation of every reform Marcus suggested. Public acknowledgement of systemic failure, and pray that genuine change prevents complete destruction. Thomas Chen joined them, his operations background making him focus on logistics while the world burned. We need to address the other 46 incidents. People are already coming forward on social media. Hashtag is trending. SkyPulse Racism has 2 million tweets in the last hour. Set up a hotline. Dedicate resources to reviewing every complaint we buried. Reach out to every person who signed an NDA and offer to void it. Give them platform to tell their stories. That's going to generate more lawsuits. Good. Let them sue. Let them win. Let them force changes we should have made years ago. The strategy was financial suicide from a traditional corporate perspective. But Marcus understood something the business school textbooks didn't teach. Sometimes the only way to survive was to burn down everything broken and rebuild from ash. Agent Rodriguez finished her preliminary interviews and approached Marcus. We'll be filing charges, multiple counts of civil rights violations, conspiracy, assault. This is going to trial. Good, Marcus said. Make sure it's public. Make sure people understand this isn't isolated. Make sure the consequences are visible. The agents left. The FBI investigation would take months, would generate thousands of pages of documentation, would eventually result in convictions that sent Derek Mason to federal prison for 18 months and Rachel Hayes for 12. But that was future justice. Present justice was happening right now in first class. Bob Hayes addressed the remaining passengers, his voice carrying the weight of corporate contrition that might actually be genuine. SkyPulse Airlines takes full responsibility for what happened today. We failed, Mr. Sterling. We failed every passenger of color who's experienced discrimination in our cabins. We failed the basic promise of treating everyone with dignity. That changes now. Completely. Permanently. Devin Mitchell stood. How do we know this isn't just PR? How do we know you won't wait for the news cycle to move on and go back to business as usual? Because I'm making it personal, Marcus said. Every dollar I lose from the stock dropping, I'm putting into the diversity fund. Every settlement we pay, I'm matching from my personal fortune. Every change we implement, I'm tying to my own compensation. If this company doesn't fix its culture, I don't get paid. That's the commitment. The passengers absorbed this. Saw the bandage on Marcus's temple. Saw the handcuff marks on his wrists. Saw a billionaire who could have handled this quietly but chose the public path because quiet solutions never solved systematic problems. Maya Washington approached, phone out but not filming now. Can I interview you? For my journalism program? I want to write about what happens when someone with power uses it correctly. Marcus smiled for the first time since boarding the aircraft. Schedule it through Talia. I'll give you all the time you need. The deplaning took another hour. Each passenger given priority rebooking, upgraded travel vouchers, direct contact information for the legal team, no NDAs, no requirements to stay silent. Just acknowledgement that they'd witnessed something important and their voices mattered. Rachel Hayes was escorted off the aircraft by airport security. Derek Mason followed, his first officer uniform already looking like a costume from a career that no longer existed. Tyler Bennett left quietly, his suspension paperwork already filed, his future uncertain but no longer tied to SkyPulse Airlines. Senator Caldwell and Patrick were the last passengers to deplane, surrounded by lawyers who were already drafting statements and preparing for the political fallout that would end a Senate career and destroy a family legacy. The aircraft emptied. Just Marcus, Bob, and the board members remained in first class that had been transformed into a courtroom. What now? Bob asked. Now we rebuild. But first there's someone who needs to hear from us. Who? Every person who filed a complaint and got buried under an NDA. Every passenger who thought they were alone. Every voice we silenced because it was cheaper than listening. Marcus pulled out his phone. Talia had already compiled the contact list. 47 names. 47 people who deserved to know that their experiences hadn't been ignored, just delayed. The first call went to Dr. Amara Johnson, surgeon from Atlanta who'd been dragged off a SkyPulse flight in 2022 for the crime of wearing scrubs to work. She answered on the third ring, voice cautious because she recognized the SkyPulse number and nothing good had ever come from those calls. Dr. Johnson, this is Marcus Sterling. I'm the CEO of Nexus Dynamics and majority shareholder of SkyPulse Airlines. I'm calling to tell you that what happened to you in 2022 was wrong. The employees who did it have been terminated. The culture that enabled it is being destroyed. And I'm offering you whatever platform you need to tell your story without NDAs or restrictions. Silence on the other end, then crying, then words that came out between sobs. I thought no one would ever believe me. I thought I was crazy for thinking it was racism. You weren't crazy, you were right, and I'm sorry it took this long for someone to acknowledge it. The call lasted 20 minutes. By the end, Dr. Johnson had agreed to testify, to go public, to help build the case that would prevent this from happening to anyone else. Marcus made 6 more calls that night, each one similar, each one ending with someone who'd been silenced finally finding their voice again. The sun was setting over O'Hare by the time he finished. The terminal windows glowed orange and gold, beautiful despite everything that had happened beneath them. Bob Hayes stood beside Marcus, watching planes take off and land with the regularity that made modern air travel possible. You know what this is going to cost? Not just money, reputation, time, energy, years of fighting, I know. And you're still going through with it? I spent 40 years being quiet, being patient, waiting for things to get better on their own. Today proved they don't get better on their own. They get better when someone makes them better, regardless of cost. Bob nodded. Then let's make them better. They walked through the terminal together, past gates where other flights were boarding, past restaurants and shops and all the ordinary infrastructure of travel that concealed extraordinary injustice. Outside, news vans had multiplied. Camera crews from every major network, reporters doing stand-ups with the airport visible behind them, satellite trucks beaming the story across the country. Marcus stepped into the lights, took questions, told the truth. Let the cameras capture the handcuff marks and the bandage and the expensive suit that hadn't protected him from being treated as less than human. The interview went viral before he'd finished giving it. Clips shared millions of times, hashtags trending. Public opinion crystallizing around the undeniable evidence that this happened was wrong and demanded response. 3 hours later, Sky Pulse stock had recovered half its losses. Not because the market forgave the discrimination, because the market believed Marcus Sterling would fix it. 2 days later, the first lawsuits were filed. Class action representing all 47 victims plus hundreds more who came forward after seeing the coverage. 1 week later, Senator Caldwell announced he wouldn't seek re-election, citing family concerns that everyone understood meant federal investigation concerns. 2 weeks later, the FAA announced new regulations requiring third-party oversight of all airline discrimination complaints. Regulation colloquially called the Sterling Protocol. 3 months later, every major U.S. airline had implemented similar reforms, terrified of becoming the next viral story about racism at 30,000 feet. And 2 years later, Marcus Sterling sat in Seat 1A on a Sky Pulse flight to Los Angeles, watching a young black boy named Jaden experience first class for the first time. The boy was nervous, 11 years old, traveling with his mother who'd saved for months to afford the tickets. Marcus saw himself 3 decades ago, saw the worry in the mother's eyes that someone would question whether they belonged. First time in first class? Jaden nodded, wide-eyed. It's a good seat, but honestly, I prefer the view from here better. Marcus stood, gathered his belongings, gestured to Seat 1A. Why don't you sit here instead? I'll take 3C. Better for working anyway. The boy's mother started to protest, but Marcus handed her his business card. If anyone questions whether you belong here, call me directly. That number goes straight to my cell phone. She took the card with shaking hands, tears forming in her eyes because she understood exactly what this gesture meant. Marcus settled into Economy Plus, opened his laptop, reviewed the quarterly diversity report that showed Sky Pulse leading the industry in inclusive hiring, in bias complaint resolution, in creating the kind of culture where everyone truly belonged. The flight attendant, new hire, 24 years old, trained under the reform protocols, approached with genuine warmth. Can I get you anything, Mr. Sterling? Just coffee, black, and thank you for making this a good flight for everyone. She understood the emphasis on everyone, smiled, returned with coffee that was actually good because that was another thing they'd fixed. The plane took off. Marcus watched Chicago shrink below him, the city where he'd been born and built an empire, and learned that real power wasn't about domination but protection. He thought about Derek Mason, currently 8 months into his federal sentence, teaching GED classes to inmates and learning what it felt like to be powerless. About Rachel Hayes, working retail after being blacklisted from every airline, rebuilding a life from rubble she'd created herself. About Senator Caldwell, whose political career had ended in scandal, whose legacy was now permanently tied to discrimination rather than legislation. About 47 people who'd been silenced finally speaking, their stories creating a record that prevented erasure. about an industry that had changed not because it wanted to, but because one man had decided that enduring humiliation without response was enabling future humiliation of others. The plane climbed into sunset, golden light streaming through windows, illuminating passengers who sat in seats they'd earned without having to prove they deserved them. And Marcus Sterling, who owned 30% of the airline and 100% of the conviction that some fights mattered more than comfort, opened his email to find a message from Hilton Hotels asking if he'd consider conducting a similar audit of their properties. He typed a simple response. When do we start? Because justice wasn't a destination. It was a practice. It required vigilance and courage and the willingness to walk into humiliation with cameras rolling to prove that humiliation happened. Real power served those who couldn't protect themselves. Real wealth built systems that outlasted individual fortunes. Real change demanded that comfort be sacrificed on the altar of doing what was right, even when right was expensive and difficult and guaranteed to generate enemies. The flight attendant returned with a warm towel, the small luxury that first class had been designed around. Thought you might want this anyway, she smiled. Even in 3C, Marcus accepted it. The gesture was small, but it represented everything. Dignity offered freely, respect given automatically, humanity acknowledged without prerequisite. That was the world worth building. That was the airline worth saving. That was the future worth fighting for, even when the fight left scars that never fully healed. Outside, the sky turned from gold to purple to black. Stars emerged. The plane climbed higher, and somewhere below, another person was preparing to fly, hoping they wouldn't be questioned, praying they'd be treated like they belonged. Because of what happened in first class on Flight 2820, their prayers had better odds of being answered. That was enough. Not perfect, not complete, but enough to keep fighting for more.